Welcome back to the Vectra podcast. Today, you're joined by me, Zoe, and then we also have two very, very awesome people from Vectra, Gearoid, who's a familiar face on the podcast channel, and we have a new face as well, Niall. So, Gearoid, now, can you tell us more about yourselves?
Sure thing. Hey, my name is Gearoid O Fearghail. I'm a senior product manager with Vectra, based in our Dublin office, and focusing on how we can transform the analyst experience to make it easier for you guys to understand what Vectra thinks is suspicious and figure out exactly what's happening.
My name is Niall Errity. I'm a director for professional services, also based in Dublin, looking after the MXDR services here at Vectra.
Yeah, that's awesome. And today our topic is the analyst experience. We have done a podcast on this before with just Gearoid, but we wanted to bring Niall in because he has a very, very unique perspective on the analyst experience. So this is the part two. Check it out. Check out part one first, and then check this one out. All right, let's get started. So we're just going to have a little discussion here, no slides at all. So now you're an analyst. What are the questions you ask when something is prioritized?
So there's a few things that go through my mind when I see something that's been prioritized. The first question is, why was this entity prioritized? And straight away, I just want to find out what are the activities happening on the host or the account to try and figure out what's the reasoning behind the logic behind why it was prioritized in the first place. With that, I then want to review the activity for the host of the entity, just to see what was going on with it. So was there lateral movement? Was there like data exfiltration? Was there other behaviors, different categories? Because that can kind of give me an idea as to how far along a potential attack chain they are. Next thing I want to know is what is this thing that's being prioritized? So is it like a normal host inside the environment? Is it a server? Is it a special server like a domain controller? Trying to get the context around what that entity actually is. Or if it's an account, is it an administrator? Or is it somebody who works in IT department? All that kind of context is very, very important for the investigation. And then, of course, the last thing is to dig into the evidence, be able to kind of get into it and see exactly what's been happening around that time of the event when it was prioritized.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, who is this? What do they do? Why should I care? They're kind of the key points. It's always interesting, isn't it? Sometimes with advanced behavioral detections like vector fires, it's always that kind of view of what exactly has happened can be kind of hard now, right?
Absolutely. In kind of a more traditional world, you have signatures. So you look at things very black and white. Does this match what you're trying to look for? In our world, things are a little bit different because they're usually behavioral based or leveraging AI. And sometimes it's not very clear unless you know how the model works, exactly what's happening. So that initial part there is why was it prioritized, and digging into the detections is quite an important part, because once you understand that, you can then quickly get to the conclusion to it.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. And this is kind of one of the driving factors behind the Respond UX and our AI-driven prioritization. Like, I think it's always kind of easy when you have signatures saying, well, this signature is a known piece of malware and it's a known bad thing. This is this is the evidence right here. You can just see the process being executed. You can see exactly what's happening. But behavior, it's much more kind of difficult in a way to say, well, this thing is an indicator of suspicious behavior, and our machine learning has learned that this behavior is significantly different from what you'd expect, and thus warrants detection. And when you go and look at the evidence, you're looking at not just a specific process and a specific piece of malware. You're looking at, say, weeks of, this is our baseline, this is what we'd expect to happen. It's a kind of an interesting paradigm in that regard. But within the Respond UX, what we've looked to do is just say, when you come in and you look at what you need to investigate, we give you those three answers right there. Who is this? What did they do? Why was it prioritized? We give you an attacker profile saying, hey, in this attacker profile, we have, this is who we think this is. This is what we think. So you can say, well, this vector thinks this is an external adversary. And that lens helps you investigate it way more seamlessly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, and this kind of touches into my next question for the both of you. So Vectra doesn't just fire detections. We say this host or this account is dodgy. So how does that make the analyst life a lot easier?
Yeah, this is a game changer. In my previous work, we'd always focus, particularly on the network side, always focus on IP addresses. You'd very rarely have a host name to go by. So when you're focusing on IP addresses, you don't know, like, is that the true source? Has it been proxied somewhere? Is it being natted? What's actually happening to that, or where that activity is actually coming from initially? You might be lucky. You might have some RDP or SMB traffic where you can look at it and find out a host name, but 9 times out of 10 you don't have that. You're going off just raw packets across the network and not too sure what the true source is. With Vectra, you actually do get that host name right away, so you know exactly what the entity is behind it. As well as in the UI, you can see the context of that, right? So you'll know whether it is that server I mentioned previously or whether it is a proxy device, because that's really important. If it is a proxy device, you want to go in behind that and understand what really is behind the actual activity itself. But being able to quickly correlate to real world devices and accounts as well. So I'm speaking about endpoints because endpoints is typically how we focus on network side in the past. It's changed quite a bit. Obviously, being a platform now, we can look at things on an account basis as well, both in cloud and on premise. But in the cloud world, being able to kind of correlate back to, what is a true source account. AWS is a very good example of this, right? Where we don't typically have the true account performing the behaviors, but with Vectra, we can use the technology to get back to who the true account is. That just saves so much time. You're going from hours to minutes here to figure out what the true source is.
Yeah. We call that Kingpin here. That attribution correlation for AWS. We did a podcast on that, by the way. You guys should check it out. But sorry,
Yeah.
Garo, you had something to say?
No, always. Niall, so would you rather that you go in, you're looking at in the old world when you have an IP address, would you prefer if the IP address is being used by 4 servers or the attacker you're trying to investigate, they're using 2 different IPs? What's the worst? What's worst of the 2 of those?
What's worst of the two of those? Um, hmm. When you say the worst, is in like the worst to
For you
investigate or the worst?
investigating, worst of
Yeah,
investigating.
it's the 4 hosts, right? It's trying to figure out
Yeah.
like yeah, that's a nightmare.
Yeah, 100%. And like, imagine this is the problem that Vector faced from day one. We were like, okay, well, we can try and use IPs. That's industry standard. But then you're trying to build behaviors and you've got like 20 or 30 hosts who are kind of intermingling the same IP spaces. And you're like, okay, well, this IP, this does this thing all the time. But actually, it's just that 2 of the hosts are doing it all the time and this new host has come in and actually this is suspicious behavior. That's kind of one of the reasons we built Host ID because we're trying to build behaviors, but the behaviors aren't actually, how can you track behaviors if you're not seeing all the activity performed by somebody? Same with Kingpin for Azure, like or Kingpin for AWS even. If you have 20 different users using the same role, then how do you know what the actual behavior of the user is? That's kind of it. But yeah, it's nice though, isn't it, when you can just go in and we pull in context from EDR, we pull in from all these different functionalities. Anywhere where we can get an idea of what the easiest to understand name for something is, we'll pop that in. And that means that when you come in to investigate it, there's no figuring it out. You just see, oh, this is the host name. Great, brilliant. And if I want to look at all the activity, it's all there. We give you a full picture of exactly what's happened.
Exactly. Yeah, Vector really does put all the puzzle pieces in front of you, and it's just delivered on a silver platter, and you can just put it together, right? Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
So we touched upon 3 questions that an analyst answers, right? Who, what, why. So how does Vectra make it easier to answer those questions?
Yeah, for me, this has been quite an eye opener. I've used a lot of tools in my past, and I mentioned there a minute ago that you're always looking at the IP addresses. I never realized the importance of the user experience until coming to Vectra, where you have a much easier platform to use. I'm much more used to being, on the command line, writing little bash scripts or trying to do things through, awk and sed. Here, I don't have to worry about that too much. It's all there for me when I need to at my fingertips. So to answer those questions, just to get back to it, the UI really is a key part to it, and be able to have that right there in front of you is just so incredibly powerful. Something else I didn't mention actually in the past question you asked, but it's also quite important for identifying the host of the account. It's level of automation, right? Because if you want to stop something happening and be able to come to a point of stop the attack in progress so you can finish your investigation without knowing that true source, you can't easily do that, right? So you're actually being almost being allocated more time because you can contain it as you're doing investigation, and then once you finish the investigation, you can release it again. It's something you just don't think about until you have that capability right in front of you. You typically do have it on the EDR side if you do something on the EDR side, but where you don't have EDR visibility or you don't have necessarily an EDR on it, you can do other means to contain those things and stop them via network visibility. And cloud, of course. I keep forgetting cloud is quite an important part of this jigsaw.
I mean, in fairness, sometimes, in network detections can be so complex that it makes sense to be focusing on it because they're the ones that get up to your level now. It's just like, that's how it is. I think the thing about the UX is really critical, though, insofar as we aren't just firing, detections over the wall. We spend a load of time and effort to make sure that we explain exactly what's happening. So if you ever see a detection, and that, I mean, everyone's probably familiar with the construct of Kerber roasting. But if that detection comes up and maybe you haven't been in there for a while, or maybe even more frequently, if your company is active in multiple different clouds and you aren't able to keep up with all of these different cloud constructs, if you see a detection in Vectra, we're not just going to use, say suspicious EC2 hijacking. We're going to say virtual machine is being hijacked. We're going to have all in plain English saying this is what's happening. And we always have detailed explanations of what exactly is happening behind it. So if you're like, I can't remember exactly what's working here, or how can I validate this? We give you those steps saying, here's how to verify this. And if it's an issue, here's how you can remediate it.
And all the models are also mapped to the MITRE framework, which means if you want to do further research or you want to understand better, you can easily go off there and understand exactly what's covered by each model. I use that quite a lot.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Okay, we have one last question for the both of you. So you have a toughie. You're in like a little pickle here, and you're not sure what's going on with the detections that are firing. Where do you go?
Sounds like most days you come across one of these. And I'm assuming the answer isn't Batman. You don't want to call Batman on this one.
I mean, I thought you were Batman. Sorry.
No, for me, it's just going back in what I said earlier on. The digging into the details is the most important part for me, right? Like if we don't have the context or we don't have the information we need directly in the detections that are fired, we need to get into the details as quickly as possible. And again, with RUX, you have everything there. You have all the logs, you have all the network activity, you even have PCAPs and detections. You can pull those out and you can investigate from that point of view, which helps to get the answer as quickly as possible. So that's for me when I'm in a toughie. I'm of course, calling on my peers to ask for their opinions on things, but when it comes to actual information, it's diving into the details is the key part.
Yeah. One click, and there's no this IP range over this time plus this IP range over this time. You just click it and we'll aggregate all that data together. And it just sees line by line exactly what's happening. And there's no need to figure out the fields that you need to figure out either. We'll do that for you too. So there's no issue with, say, having to remember the syntax of this specific network metadata in this Zeek format. We'll just say, hey, this is what's happened. This is the host. This is the source. This is the target. Go at it. And it kind of removes it. Do you think you'd ever go back, Niall, to looking at the raw logs again?
Well, I would, because I like the challenge of it. Would I go back to it on a day-to-day basis? Absolutely not. No. Just in terms of time saved, focusing on what matters, you couldn't go back to that world again. It's just too much time being spent on it. It's definitely the future here.
Yeah.
Yep. Time is so important.
100%, especially because with more and more attack surfaces happening, you just don't have time to spend that long investigating each alert, and everything you can do to spend less time doing the drudge work and more time doing the thinking and figuring out exactly what's happening, the better off you are.
Absolutely. Okay, and speaking about time, we're out of time. Thank you both, Gearoid and Niall, so much for joining me on another episode of the Vectra podcast. This is great information, and the unique perspective Niall really brought color to the analyst experience. So if you guys haven't checked us out already, we have an entire playlist of our podcast on YouTube, threat briefings, platform enhancements, and discussions like this with Gearoid and Niall that are really important to the cybersecurity landscape. We're also on Spotify too, if you like to use that platform instead. And thank you guys again both so much for your time. And yeah, we'll see you next time. All right, bye.
Thanks, Zoey. Cheers. Bye-bye.